Before I start, I got to relay something to you. I was looking through my Progressive Farmer magazine yesterday, and there's something apropos in there. First of all, this was a wheat edition. It talks about wheat and it says special section, wheat trends and contest winners. Well, the contest winner, the person that grew the most bushels per acre wheat, was from Reardon, Washington, and he was a Hutterite. His name was Chris Gross, and he averaged 212 bushels per acre for irrigated wheat, best in the nation. So we got a little ways to go yet over here, Eugene, for that. We're not quite there yet. But that was interesting. But the other thing I saw in here was an article about, it says, take a class in wheat. I don't know if any of you get the Progressive Farmer magazine, but if you do, you might look this up. Talks about, this scientist is talking about where wheat still dominates. States such as Kansas, Montana, North Dakota, Oklahoma, and Texas will probably always lead in wheat acreage and wheat production, according to the Kansas State Wheat Research Group. But this is the interesting thing. In this article, it says, and I quote here, it's been 150 years since the Mennonite immigrants introduced a winter wheat variety called Turkey Red hard winter wheat to Kansas. Prior to that, Kansas farmers had planted spring wheat, and it wasn't faring very well, Harris explains. Turkey Red was a turning point that led to an entire wheat infrastructure, from railroads to mills and so forth. And then it goes on to explain about the great qualities of Turkey Red wheat. So it's kind of interesting because we planted some there by the museum, and we're going to mill it, and you'll get to experience the actual Turkey Red wheat flour if you want to. I guess we're going to be selling that, so that's going to be good. Anyway, when I came in today, Dr. Bork came up to me and said, "How did you get talked into doing the speech today?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to tell you about that. Laverne told me that I'd be doing this, so that's how I got here." But he did have a point. I mean, his reasoning was, and he's already explained that I lived through it with my dad Harley. But I got to show you a couple things. First of all, maybe this will work. I don't know. Okay, that didn't work. Maybe that'll work. That didn't work. I don't know if my little deal is plugged in. If not, I need to have somebody back there just push the advance button, the up and down on my computer. Because this is supposed to go to the next slide. And there's an up and down. On the computer, you can just page up, page down. If you page up, I think it'll go to the next one. Do you see that? Hopefully you can. Little page up, page down button there. Find it? Now go the other way. There we go. Here's the reason why I don't know a whole lot about what happened during the centennial celebration, because in 1974, I was in Africa, and I got back from the Congo with the Mennonite Central Committee Teachers Abroad program in June of that year, and the end of June. And when I got back, I almost immediately was put on a combine cutting wheat, and then I was trying to enroll at graduate school in KU, so I missed a lot of things. But when Laverne had told me that I was going to be doing this, I thought, well, that's no problem, because I got my brother Nathan and my sister Rita, and they were surely here. So I talked to my brother Nathan, and I called him and I said, now I need to get some background information about some of the things that were happening here during the centennial year. And because I was sure that he was here and did a lot of things. I knew we'd done some things together, but not so, Nathan said. He was in Texas working on his PhD, and he wasn't here hardly at all during that summer. So then I said, well, maybe my sister was around here, and she was like, no, same thing. She was at KU, and she wasn't here either. So I thought, well, I better start thinking real quickly about how I'm going to refresh my memory on all the things that happened that year. And fortunately, the Bethel College Mennonite Library and Archives was the answer. There's a lot of things there that my dad had done that are preserved there, and so I could go there and refresh my memory on a lot of things that happened. Besides the centennial in 1974 was a big year in many ways. As I said, I was just coming back from the Congo, so I missed out on some of the things that happened in the celebration and the planning that went into it. But there were a lot of things that I did get involved with. But coming back from the Congo, I first had to realize that you could go to a store and buy about anything you wanted and have multiple options of things to buy at the same time. It was incredible. So I had a whole mindset reset to deal with. That year, Dad took a leave of absence from being the vice president of Friends University to spearhead the centennial activities. But the thing that nearly derailed the entire involvement in the activities was the fire that destroyed his childhood home, the place we call the home place, the home of my Uncle Carl, his brother Carl, and his family. And I remember the phone call well that morning when we were informed that the house had burned to the ground, and that Carl was badly burned, but that he'd gotten his family out, including his wife Dolores, who's in a wheelchair. Carl lived for 1 month after that in the intensive burn unit at Wesley Medical Center. And my dad went to visit him every day. I went to see my uncle several times during that time. And he was in excruciating pain. It was a really tough time. After that, my dad and mom scrambled to take in the youngest children, Carl and Lynette. So they came to live with us, and then they raised them through college. But it also meant that Dad dealt with the funeral arrangements and dealing with Carl's estate and everything. So there was a lot of things to get done that year. And fortunately, he was able to do them. Another thing to remember is that the Kansas Wheat Commission was celebrating its 100th anniversary at the same time, which we've already mentioned. And there was a kind of a logo. There was a trailer and a float that we had going all over the place for that celebration. For Schweitzer, my dad thought this was a great thing because he was also the co-chair of that celebration. But for Schweitzer, this was a win-win situation because we had a lot more involvement with the turkey red wheat thing as well. And so the turkey red wheat trailers, if you look at the schedules that they had for those things, it was incredible. They were every single day for 3 months, they were somewhere. And it was even in Nebraska and Oklahoma and all over Kansas. Every parade and every celebration, they had those wheat trailers there. So it was good to bring additional information and attention to our own celebration. What I'm going to do today is highlight some of the activities and the inner workings of the 100-year celebration. I know that many of you here today have been involved or had been involved in a lot of those activities. We can move to the next. Is this thing working yet? Maybe so. We're going to just kind of go through some shots there. But while this is up here, I have to talk a little bit about Brian Stucky. He's the one that developed this. And he reminded me today that this is an emblem. It's not a logo, it's an emblem. The difference is that there's a lot of history and stuff that goes into that. But that, Brian Stucky, you want to stand up or raise your hand so people know who you are. I remember Brian coming over to the house. This was 50 years ago. He wasn't quite as old as he is today. He came over to the house and was meeting in Dad's office, and they were going over all the stuff that they wanted to have in here. And Dad was like, well, you're an art major, just go ahead and do it. Make this thing, put this together and make something. And he did. So that's what we used for the emblem then. And we've got some mugs back there that have that 100-year thing on it as well as the 150th. So it's a pretty cool emblem that Brian put together. Anyway, I'm going to highlight some of the things that happened 50 years ago. Hard for me to believe that 50 years have passed. So maybe some of the rest of you have that same feeling that it doesn't seem like it could be 50 years that have gone by. Obviously, each generation of Swiss Mennonite descendants from that original group of 62 families continue to spread and disseminate across the globe, and have branched out a great deal from those first taboos that they had back in the earliest days. Many of you probably remember that, marrying someone from across Turkey Creek was kind of a taboo at the time. But even Laverne's dad, my uncle Mary, he had to go across Turkey Creek and find a Siemens girl that was suitable for him. So those taboos kind of quickly went away. I mean, my own wife, she grew up in a Mennonite area there by Bueller, but her mother was a Southern Baptist from Alabama, so she grew up not Mennonite, even though she grew up in amongst the Mennonites. So I'm sure that many of you and your children are no doubt having similar experiences, and you're seeing this spreading out of all the Swiss Mennonites all over the place, no longer living in Mennonite communities. And so that's why Shemeka exists, really, is to celebrate the 150 years and to remember, always remember, that historical cultural heritage is important to us. Speeches, parades, and events fade from memory, but the monument at the Hopefield Church is the most significant and lasting thing that was produced out of the 100-year celebration. It's a monument which tells the story of our arrival here. And I have personal connections to the monument, as it's one of the first things that Dad put me to work on after my return from Africa. My brother Nathan and I spent some time mixing mud and hauling stones and everything for Vernon Weedle. Some of you may remember that as well. Vernon was the guy that actually built the structure with concrete block and stone. And Dad had us leave one tractor there to move around the concrete blocks and pallets of stone. And he also had us drill with the largest postal auger we had with the tractor. We dug angle holes around the foundation, tied that all in with steel into the foundation because he wanted to make sure that thing didn't ever move and it would stand the test of time. So that's part of it. I'll get back to the monument later, but let's take a look at the impressive list of events and other activities that took place during that celebration. There were many, many, many of them, too many to adequately revisit here. But most of all, most of you probably remember being involved in some of them. The Hopefield Mennonite Church, being the original church from the new land of our pioneer ancestors, was the center of activities for the Patuska Hopeham's fellow congregation. So, but in addition to that, the sister churches of the First Mennonite Church of Christian in Mountain Ridge, the First Mennonite Church in Pretty Prairie, the Eden Mennonite Church in Mountain Ridge, First Mennonite Church of Burns, First Mennonite Church of McPherson, the Kingman Mennonite Church in Kingman, and then also the Salem Mennonite and Salem Zion Mennonite churches in Freeman, South Dakota were part of it, and the West Zion Mennonite Church in Mountain Ridge as well. So then many other churches with sizable Swiss Mennonite memberships are involved in the celebrations in many ways. The activities of the 74 celebration encompassed a wide variety of events, from a pilgrimage hike from Halstead to Mountain Ridge, to the Wichita Symphony production, and much more, including the State Fair extravaganza that year. Planning for all these activities began in earnest in 1969, so they were ahead of the curve there. At the Hopefield Church congregational meeting in 1969, the congregation moved to create a special centennial committee, which consisted of Pete Kaufman, Peter J.P. Schrog, and Lyle Stucky. And then the committee also included Melvin Stucky, Ed R. Stucky, Menno Kaufman, and Harley J. Stucky as chairman. Even earlier than 5 years out, as I was going through Dad's notes, there were references to either building some sort of a monument or an immigrant house, or a replica of an immigrant house that was on wheels that he could move around to different congregations. That was one of his ideas. In March of 1971, Dad wrote a letter on behalf of the Centennial Committee, which stated that the Centennial Committee feels that every church whose membership is wholly or largely composed of Swiss Mennonites should be represented on the Centennial Planning Committee. On this basis, the following churches should be represented: the Eden Mennonite Church, the First Mennonite Church of Pretty Prairie, the Zion Mennonite Church of Kingman, Bethany Mennonite Church of Kingman, First Mennonite Church of McPherson, Mennonite Church of Christian in Mountain Ridge, the First Mennonite Church of Burns, along, of course, with the Hopefield Mennonite Church. So all of those churches were asked to supply at least 3 members or up to 3 members to serve on this committee. And the response was 100%. Every church had members that were part of this planning committee. The group appointed the executive committee composed of William Youngke as vice president, Ed R. Stucky as secretary, Walter Gearing as treasurer, and Harley J. Stucky as president. At their first meeting in March of 1972, they immediately came up with 11 committees that they needed to form. Some of these included building a monument or an immigrant house on wheels, the wheat story, recipes, clothes of the era, music, art and drama, practical arts. They needed someone to conduct guided tours to Russia. They wanted a fundraising committee, and they wanted a committee to write and publish books and pamphlets. And they also wanted to get the South Dakota Swiss Mennonites involved. So all of those things were part of their initial push. It was a whole variety of different things. Already in 1972, things were taking shape for a celebration involving a broad range of activities. It's hard for me to believe that 50 years has passed, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way, but here's a rundown of some of those activities. First of all, because the Hopefield Church is the center of everything, they voted that they needed to do some remodeling and reconstruction, added central air conditioning and so forth, so that was kind of the first thing that happened. Then they had a ceremony in Peabody on July the 27th of that year. July 28th, the service was at Hopefield Church. Sunday, August 3rd and 4th was a dramatic production at the Bernard Workentine Barn in Halstead. Now, I did remember that because I was on the barn cleaning detail, and that was quite a little project in itself. But we did get it done and actually had a pretty cool deal there with the production actually taking place in the barn. Some of you were probably there. August 16th and 17th, you had the Gospel Centennial Celebration. Then Sunday, August 24th, the Pretty Prairie and Hopefield sermons were on the immigration issues. August 30th, the celebration was at Pretty Prairie. And then August 30th also, they set up the tents at Hopefield. We had those big tents, which showed there earlier. And that's where we had the events of the day there. And that included the pilgrimage hike from Halstead to Mound Ridge, the Mound Ridge Parade. Maybe we can move through some more of the pictures. There's some more of the pictures that show some of the parade things, which actually Eugene's going to show more about in a little bit. There was a docking service, which was a rendition of the city of Richmond arriving in New York. The big event, of course, was the monument dedication service with Dr. Martin Schrog as a featured speaker. And that, of course, there was on the Hopefield grounds in the big tents. There was a pioneer costume review. There was a sermon on past, present, and future of the immigrants. There was the Wichita Symphony Conference, special concert at Century 2 in Wichita. There were many other events and parades. And the Wheat Centennial trailer, as I said, and the floats were involved every single day in June, July, and August all over the state, and also in Nebraska and Oklahoma. And the grand finale of it all was the Kansas State Fair production. Now, unfortunately, I was back at the University of Kansas then, and I wasn't there, but the Kansas State Fair production included the Mennonite Men's Choir, which was introduced by Governor Robert Dockey. And he thanked the choir, and I quote, for their beautiful and touching music. Now, how many of you here sang in the choir at that time? There's got to be some of you that were members. Just Eugene? He's the only one. Okay, well, anyway, that was a huge event there, part of the State Fair production. One of the interesting things that I found while I was doing some research at the library was all of the information regarding the State Fair production, because that by itself, that file, the Harley J. Stucky file in the State Fair would be enough for a book itself, because there were letters to and from the State Fair Board, letters of explanation of what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. There were contracts that were signed back and forth, insurance requirements back and forth, space requirements, how much space they were going to need and require, logistics, etc., plus letters to the governor to get him involved. And all of that stuff, my dad had written letters and he kept copies of every single one of them, so they're all there to show how it all worked out. But the choir was kind of the capstone of that. All these things, these parades, events, concerts, sermons, speeches, etc., were uplifting and great reminders of our pioneer forefathers and their contributions to our comfortable lives of today. However, the lasting symbol of it all is the monument at the Hopefield Church. I previously mentioned how my brother Nathan and I helped Vernon Weedle by hauling stone. Oh yeah, this is, we're getting ahead one slide here. But anyway, we hauled stone. But one day, Dad, in the morning at breakfast, Dad said, Frank, I want you to go out and get a wheat truck and hook it up to a combine trailer today. I want you to go to Wichita and load up the big globe, stainless steel globe for the monument, and the 7-foot cross that goes on top of it. Load that thing up and bring it out to Hopefield Church, because I've got a crane coming out there, and we're going to set the monument, the globe on top of the monument today. So I'm like, well, okay, whatever. So I went out and got the truck hooked up. I went down to Wichita, got the monument set on the trailer, or the globe set on the trailer with the big cross, got it all chained down, got some interesting looks getting through Wichita traffic with that thing. But we got there, got it there at the site, and yeah, there it is. There's the globe on the combine trailer. And we got there, and Dad and I and Merrill Unruh and Milo Gearing, with the help of the crane operator, we lifted the globe up into position high above the pillar. And then I climbed up that ladder, so that's me up there in the book. I climbed up the ladder with a couple of big wrenches, and I remember someone, probably Dad, telling me, now make sure you don't get your fingers underneath the thing when it comes down. I was successful, man, I got all my fingers. But anyway, we got up there, and I had a couple of big wrenches, and fortunately, the template that we had made fit the holes on the base of the globe. Got it lowered down position. I bolted it down, and then climbed up into the thing and unhooked the crane off of it. And 50 years ago, it was done, and it's still standing there today. So it must have worked out all right. Got it bolted down, and it stayed. So that's a good thing. The 7 plaques that tell the story of immigration on the cast iron bronze plates was quite another story. I think historians and attorneys both have the philosophy that you never say in 10 words what you can say in 100. So the job of paring the wording down to make every single letter on those plaques have maximum impact took 17 rewrites. And I remember many discussions with Dad's office, where they're trying to get the meaning he wanted and get it concisely cut down to fit on the plaques. So I'm going to read the section that Dad wrote in this little book on the marker here. This is a quote from how the plaques came to be. The wording on the plaques was another challenge. Dad says, I wrote the first draft for 7 plaques long before we approved the design for memorial marker. So we knew they were going to have plaques before they ever did the marker. I first thought the story's best organization required 7 individual plaques, which incidentally is also a good biblical number. The end product was the 17th draft. Most of the changes were rather minor, as the subject and general progression was always acceptable. I would distribute each new draft at our meetings. I could count on Menno Kaufman, William Youngke, and others to accept the main body of each plaque, but to be critical of a word or two. This was really helpful as I tried to refine each draft for greater clarity and a more meaningful script. And so that's how it came to be that there are 7 plaques out there that are part of the monument that tell the whole story of the beginning of our migration to the successful migration to Kansas. And I'd encourage you, if you haven't been out there for a while, to go out there and bring your families and take a look and read the monuments, read the plaques on the monument, because they're a great description in a real succinct way of the whole events that led to our arrival, the Swiss Mennonite arrival here. All of these things happened because of the support of many, many people, many congregations, their willingness to give their time and talents and money to the success of the 74 celebration. And we'll need the same kind of collaboration of people and congregations to make the 150th celebration just as meaningful. The monument stands and hopefully will continue to stand as long as those bolts hold there, a symbol of the resilience and determination of a persecuted and displaced congregation of 62 families led by my great-great-grandfather, Elder Jacob Stucky and Jacob Garian from Katuvska in the Volhynian region of Ukraine. Now, Laverne had talked a little bit about the persecution, but for me, it's a miracle when you really think about it, the miracle is that any of our Swiss Mennonite brethren survived the initial persecution in Switzerland. All you have to do, if you really want to depress yourselves, I have a copy, my dad gave me this copy of the Martyr's Mirror. And if you want to have a depressing day, you can read this, and the descriptions of man's inhumanity to man is incredible. I mean, our ancestors were hunted down like animals. They were burned at the stake. They were beheaded. They were hung upside down. Everything you can imagine that people could think of for torture, they did. So it's amazing that any of them survived. But they spread out. They hid. They were very, very devout in their faith, and they weren't willing to give it up, even though the Catholic hierarchy was definitely trying to eliminate all of the Anabaptists. So it's a miracle that they made it to this point. But in any case, all of those 62 families, they eventually made it to New York, and all but 14 of those families then came here to Kansas. And they came by train, and they heard a lot about Peabody, Kansas. And I remember my mother telling me a story about the people in New York, while they were there in New York, and they'd been hearing about they're going to go to Peabody, Kansas. Somebody said before they left, wow, if this is New York, just imagine what Peabody's going to be like. So I think as they took their train journey and they left, and fewer people became visible, and it just ended up being vast prairies, they probably changed their minds about that. But in any case, they arrived in Peabody, and they ended up then getting over to Halstead, and then we had that pilgrimage mark where they actually walked back up to Mount Ridge area here. So in closing, I need to tell you one more story that happened to me about the whole celebration. It has to do with that particular slide. One hot, windy summer day in August of 1974, I was heading out to work some ground up north of Mount Ridge when Dad stopped me and said, "This afternoon I want you to shut down for a little while and be at Walton, Kansas at the east edge of Highway 50 at 2 p.m. And I said, "What's happening there at Walton that I need to be there for that at 2 p.m.? And he said, "Well, it's a dedication of the historic wheat centennial sign. It's being erected there, and the governor's coming to dedicate the marker, and I need to have some people to be there." And I was like, "Dad, it's 100 degrees, it's really windy." I said, "And you think that the governor's going to come down from Walton, or come to Walton, Kansas to dedicate that marker today?" And he said, "Yeah, he promised me he'd be there." So I said, "Okay, I'll come there straight from the field." So about 1:30 in the afternoon, I shut the tractor down and I headed to Walton. I got there at about 2 o'clock. Dad and about 5 or 6 others were waiting. If you've ever been to Walton, in this little side, just off the east of town there's a little side road. You can see this sign. I got there, and about 2:15, a black car pulled up, and out comes the governor, Governor Docking, with 2 aides, and with the dust and gravel blowing around amidst the noise of passing semis. Dad told the whole story of Mennonites and turkey bed hard winter wheat to all 6 of us. And the governor read the plaque out loud, thanked everyone for being a part of the wheat centennial, and 15 minutes later he headed back to Topeka. I headed back to the tractor. Thanks for listening.